Hello, everybody. It's almost time for a long weekend. Thanksgiving weekend usually isn't very relaxing for most people, so it's hard to just say it's a break. Most people have hectic things going on, but some of us will be able to relax this weekend and just have a really long weekend. Um, Speaking of that, the long weekend, I have fallen behind on grading. I'm hoping to get that caught up over the weekend. Had a busy couple weeks with meetings and paperwork and all the stuff, all the paperwork that needs to be submitted by the end of the calendar year has kind of shown up to do it once. So I've fallen a little bit behind on grading, so I will get that caught up soon. Hopefully get that caught up over the weekend. What else is going on? Oh, on Monday, I'll send an announcement out about this probably Saturday or Sunday. We might start just a few minutes late. There's some job interviews right before. Only time I could find everybody's schedule was like right before our class. So the last one is like scheduled 12 to 1. There's no way it's going to take an hour. It'll probably take half an hour. So I don't think we'll really be late. But since it's marked on the schedule as ending at 1, we might be a few minutes late. And they're in our classroom here. So for those who come to campus, if you get here Monday and the doors closed at the time we would normally be coming in, setting up the class, the interview's running just a little bit long, so we'll get started shortly after. I'll send an announcement about it. So keep an eye on your email Saturday or Sunday, as it gets close to Monday, and I'll probably just set it so the class officially starts 15 minutes late. That way there's no worried about that, but just letting you know that. What else is on this list? Oh yeah, the other day we were talking about consoles. I did go back and double check that article I found, and I was remembering completely wrong. The article I read earlier this year is when they finally shut Stadia servers down. I don't know why I had it in my mind it was the other one and they were restarting it. I think because I thought the servers were shut down years ago, but that's probably why they canceled Stadia, because nobody even knew the servers were still running. And the Steam console I mentioned has just gone into production. It was just announced and started into production in September. So it's not actually out yet. So I guess we do only have the 2 consoles. I don't know why I was thinking there was 3 the other day. Or non-Nintendo consoles, but you have to work for Nintendo to make games for Nintendo. They're they're closed. They're a little bit more closed than some of the other systems. So just following up on that thing from Monday. So I guess in general today, I wanted to go over some more stuff about Godot. Maybe make a small game, and I was going back and forth on different games to make. And one thing that I mentioned before is having a good go-to game that you can make in order to learn a new engine. So I think we could probably do that really quick and look at the points on that and basically make the same game we made in Game Maker, right? It took 1 day in Game Maker, and then we don't have any new logic, which makes it a little bit quicker. And then I think a lot of us can probably get started on the 4-day weekend a little bit earlier, the earlier our class leaves. But also wanted to address the point about applying the same logic in different game engines. It's a good way to learn a new tool, because in general, I'm not sure what's going on over there. In general, you're going to choose the game engine that's best for the game you want to make. They all have different strengths and weaknesses, so it's not like you're going to pick one game engine and just use that forever your entire life. It's actually kind of bad when that happens. A lot of people did that with Unity over the last couple of years. It didn't really start till about 2019. Unity had been popular for a long time, but I don't know, around 2019, it just suddenly a whole bunch of game developers just completely devoted themselves to Unity, and then they didn't know how to. Then they had to relearn how to use other game engines when Unity corporate stockholder decision-making process started upsetting the game developers. But generally, every game engine has different strengths and weaknesses, so we're going to choose the one that's best for the game we want to make. Right? If some that we won't see in class, if you want to do something that's complete full-on realism, big, most massive, most realistic thing you can get in a game, you're going to probably code it with Unreal. But if you have an idea for a fun platformer, the Unreal game engine would be very much overkill for that. Way too much overhead that is not necessary to make a platformer there. So you probably jump back to, for a platformer, maybe Godot or Game Maker, a couple that we saw here. Or GDevelop is very popular as well. Or in 2D games, I think Game Maker is easier for platforms, and GDevelop is easier for overhead map style games, or the maybe not fully overhead, looking down at an angle, sort of. I guess that's still called overhead, but they all have different strengths and weaknesses, and they're different. You're going to see a lot of them. So having a good go-to is a good one. And another thing we can do is maybe change up the storyline. Right? We did Space Invaders and Game Maker. So I was thinking today we could do walk through an example of Space Invaders knockoff in Godot, and change the storyline from what we did last time, and go over some points of that and see how the same logic can be applied in a different setting as a good way to learn new tools. And since we already saw the logic for it, it'll probably might shorten the class a little bit today, and we can get started on the 4-day weekend. For some people have an evening class tonight, or did evening classes get canceled?
Mine did.
Yeah, I think most of I heard a whole lot of people can't cancel their evening class on Wednesday night to get started traveling and things like that. Yeah, because your instructor's driving all the way across the state to be there tomorrow. Yeah, you got to be back home by early morning on Thursday and driving across the state with a full family. Indiana's a long state to drive across. Oh, my notes are right here. Okay. I set that down and somehow completely missed where I set that down.
Really depends on your perspective. For years, my family went to Florida multiple times a year because that's where my grandparents were. So
yeah, if you're used to driving that way, some states are long. Like if you're used to going to Florida, driving across Tennessee, east to Tennessee, not taking very long. Then you drive east to west across Tennessee. It's a long state going that way. But that's aside. That's not our topic. So we should be looking at games. So I'll just go ahead and jump into this. So I'll go ahead and start up Godot. Saw the other day that unlike a lot of software, they don't have tons of overhead with this one. It's not even an installer. We just, I can't make a folder. We just download the files and just start it right from it. And Godot's kind of nice because it starts up a lot quicker than just about any other game engine, because instead of using traditional programming thing to set up a GUI and then tie in all the libraries or modules or packages, whichever term we use for the stuff we import in a particular language, instead of tying those all together in the background on just a regular GUI, they just use the game engine to make the GUI. So it starts up and runs at game speeds, which is really, really nice on a game engine. If you noticed, it was quicker than some of the other things we've done. So we need one of the things I wanted to look at was the comparison, right? We can still knock off Space Invaders and make some changes to focus on what's different about the tool or some storytelling aspects. So what I was thinking this morning, actually, I wasn't sure what to do, and I thought of this idea this morning. We can do it with a different storyline. So was it just last week or was it 2 weeks ago? Yeah, it was last week.
What, the Space Invaders?
That was last Wednesday.
No. What, I think it was Tuesday or the week.
Okay. There's been a lot going on. It doesn't seem like it wasn't very long ago, but we did the sort of aliens invading Earth. So this morning I thought a good one. The same thing would fit with like a Star Wars thing, where there's a bunch of X-Wings coming in and we're defending the Death Star. It seemed like an interesting night, but a different storyline. So whenever we've talked about stories quite a few times, right? We don't need an entirely new game to tell a different story. Like anybody that's played a platformer is well aware of that. A lot of platformers are very, very similar, but they have drastically different art and telling a different story. So we can take that same logic we did before and use it to tell a different story. So it does apply to all this stuff. So I'm just going to do some quick pictures to work with. So I'm just going to go to Microsoft Paint, get us something to work, get us some pictures to work with. I'll probably resize them when we get over there, but so I'm gonna start with a nice big picture and go back to transparency. If you have transparency in Microsoft Paint, that's there. Something usually you want something with transparent images. Unlike Game Maker, Godot doesn't have a built-in editor. Or the very, very few edit graphics features they have are a lot more for imports than for actually editing stuff. So you want something you can draw on it. And for our purposes today, it really won't hurt to have a background there, right? You can remove that later when there's more time to do fancy art.
Oh, I see.
Take yours.
A couple of names. Okay, so for those who just came in, we're gonna do basically the same game we did last week, only change it up. So, or maybe the week before. It wasn't very long ago. We did the Space Invaders game, and one of the tips I had was using this, having a go-to game where you know the logic already, and you just use it to learn a new tool. So the first change, I guess, will be our storyline. So instead of aliens invading Earth, we'll go Star Wars and be protecting the Death Star when the X-Wings flying or something. So I guess we need like some sort, something looks like a turret. So I'm just going to draw. Doesn't even have to be a nice drawing, does it? A big gray square. On that. If I switch the colors here. Black, gray color. Sort of a crown fill on it. It looks less smooth. Right, not final graphics. And then another one. And move that over so it's about centered. And that'll represent one of the gun turrets or something. These are just the starting images, right? They get drawn quickly, and that's a typical process. We'll do our starting images, the ones we're going to kind of work with, and yeah, I'll just save it here. I'll call that turret. So like one of the laser turrets on the Death Star. It's also need a laser picture. So I'll create a new one. Delete all that so we have transparency on it. If you have the update on Microsoft Paint that has transparency, I'll do a green. Actually, I can probably do this. Oh, not white. Green. There you go. I'll do the like little lightning bolt shape for yeah, the default lightning bolt shape, except maybe flip it over because we're going to be shooting up, not down. That'll work for a projectile for now. So I'll just hit Control A to select everything. If we right click, we can flip it vertical. Very straight though, is it? Rotation. I think it's more rotation. If I do this, that'll make it seem straighter. That'll work and probably show up because it'll be above a black background. That's what I'm thinking, but or we could rotate it in the game engine. The game engine allows a lot more rotation than this cheap graphic software. Or I guess free graphic software. I'm on Microsoft Paint. That's the one that just comes with a lot of computers. What is this? Laser. So the laser will shoot at a new file, some sort of X-wing picture. And we can scale it down. It's often a good idea to draw the picture much bigger than you need and then scale it down with your engine, with your game engine to the size you want. Because that works a lot better than having a small picture that you have to scale up later. And this one, I'm not going to do anything very fancy. I'm just going to grab one of the brushes. Oil brush, that'll probably work for it. And I guess that will be, oops, this color. Oh, they're white, aren't they? Something like that. And then the big X-wings. Blue stripes or red stripes on it? I think the movie had both, didn't it? We'll do blue stripes. There we go. So our invaders, for enough of this storyline, save that one as X-wing. And maybe one more picture because we need something for that turret to sit on top of, don't we? So for that, I'm just gonna make a box, a gray box filled in with the same sort of stuff. That way the pattern matches wherever the turret sits and it'll move back and forth to simulate rotating or something. Yeah, some other people have said that having trouble installing Microsoft Paint if it's not on the thing. They just did a bunch of updates to it, so you might need to update Windows. There's lots of alternatives. A really good one is GIMP. Anybody use GIMP before? Probably should have just used this. This cross-platform, it runs on any single one. I probably should have maybe pointed it towards the. Oh, that's weird. Is there a download here? Nope. That's been a popular one for a while, or you can just try a few different ones. There's a lot of online ones too. Online 2D graphics program. Probably editor. A vector, I've used this one before, VECTR. Just a basic one, not anything fancy, but it'll do SVG graphics. Or after you draw the picture, it saves them as SVG like Inkscape. After you get it drawn, then you can just download a paint file to use. And still have the SVG to go through and get back and edit and all that. So some nice advantages there. Click on there, but so just some basic drawing tools. Only the file creator is like, okay. I think I have the account here. Let's see. Oh, if Google doesn't know that's where it is, I have no idea. Yeah, GIMP is a really nice one if you got that installed. That's by far the most popular on Linux, but we just need some quick starting graphics. Oh, actually, if you did if you were following along last week, if you made the game last week, you can still access the graphics. So if you go in that game maker project and into sprites, you can access the stuff you drew there because it just saves ping files. That's a normal editor. So that if you have those graphics, that would work too. We just need some way to draw stuff quickly. And there's a lot of tools out there. Inkscape, like we were using earlier in the semester, would work as well. Just draw a couple quick pictures and maybe export them as a ping. SVGs are better for editing, but since we're going to convert it into a mesh in Godot, oh wait, yeah, it's fine either way, SVG or ping. Pings tend to be a little bit better for conversion. I'll stick with that thought. It would be fine, but if you export it as however you make it, turn it into a ping, and then that converts. Game engines can work with those better because they're the way they're set up in the background, the internal data structure of them. Well, I guess I could say it real quick. A ping, portable network graphics, everything about that is to go with the TCP IP protocol, the way we transmit things across the internet, which also works really, really nicely for block transfer because it break it down into blocks, chunks, and move it. So pings are already in that format, so they convert better. And internally, as opposed to like a bitmap where you have to create a graphics, or a JPEG where you have a bunch of discrete cosine transforms. You have a bunch of waves representing the data, mathematical waves representing the color data. It's pings are already set up into what game engines need. So I'm going to create a new one. I don't know, since we're doing the knockoff of Space Invaders, I'll just call it Rebellion Invaders or something. To see how easy it is to come up with a new story using logic we already have. There's lots of ways we can apply this stuff. And you want to pay attention to stuff like that, because earlier in your education about programming, you're probably used to looking up things over and over again, right? Having to look up just about every step. A couple of problems with that. The biggest problem with that is tutorials go out of date. So while you're doing Godot stuff, make sure you look for Godot 4. There were some big improvements with Godot 4. Major improvements over Godot 3. But Godot has been popular in the open source community for a while. So YouTube is filled with tutorials going all the way back to Godot 1. So make sure you add the 4 into the searches. So there's things like that. But the biggest thing is programming is about problem solving. And problem solving, one of the most difficult things is that every problem is unique. What you've done before might be helpful, but it might not. So you want to try and pay attention to things when you can reuse stuff, reuse formal solutions that you know will work. Like what we're getting ready to do here, we're going to recreate the algorithm that we did in Game Maker for Space Invaders to make a Star Wars game. A very quick one. Now we can kind of move towards the 4-day weekend. Right. At this point in the semester, everybody's probably getting exhausted and ready for the 4-day weekend, even if Thanksgiving's not really the most relaxing time, right? So I should delete that. Just not use that yet. So like we saw before, everything in Godot is a node. Nodes combine into scenes. And once we have a scene, that scene can become a node in another scene. So that's how we'll set everything up. So I'm going to start with one that's just our world. I'll just call it space, or I'll call it level 1. Level_1, and then hopefully we'll have time for a quick cutscene. That's easy in Star Wars games, right? You just put a black background and roll some yellow text past it. And there's our intro to any Star Wars theme. And the last one, we just put the words game over on the screen. But in this one, if the X-Wings get past the laser turrets, then we can do a quick explosion. Like drawing a Death Star is easy. You just need, especially first draft, we just need a gray circle and then replace that with an explosion animation. So a completely different story, but similar things. I'll go ahead and hit save here. And this time I'm going to organize things. A little bit of organization goes a long way. So right now we have the project folk, res:// Game Maker knows where that's at. That's a variable pathway. There's also a user variable pathway that we'll use at times. Like in my case, where that res:// that's just a shortcut for this address, wherever I saved that at. Here. So C drive users, crank documents, rebellion, invaders. Oh yeah, I forgot. I was going to show something about a Windows update. Almost forgot about that. We can do that in a moment. Because actually, we can probably do it really quick because some people might still be drawing pictures, right? I did those really quick. Well, after the break, there's something. Have y'all noticed how Windows has started automatically putting things on OneDrive? So somebody asked about that the other day. So I said, I started trying to type it up in a text message and didn't even get halfway through. And it was like, we'll just look at that in class. So after the break, we'll look at how to fix that. So if you want to use your local stuff. On mine, it causes big problems because the way I teach, I like to show error messages and how to fix them. So I break my computer all the time, and OneDrive automatically backed up a broken computer on me. So I can't use my OneDrive. So I have to get rid of that immediately. Plus, I regularly use Google anyway. I didn't know it was going to automatically back up. But after the break, we'll look at that registry. The list so I don't forget again. OneDrive. Sorry, hopefully by now you all have noticed I'm a little easily distracted. So that res:// that's like a variable pathway, and it just points at this address, C drive users, frank documents, rebellion, invaders, and then any folders. When we make new folders, they'll show up here. I'll just leave that open because we can. There's a new folder button here. Probably one of those up at the top, but I'm used to just right clicking and the new folder is there, or Control N, which is a normal shortcut for a new folder. And this is going to be our scenes. I'll go our levels. Since Godot uses the word scene for the things we're building, I'll call this level, and then in there we have level 1, and hopefully if we don't run out of time, do some quick cutscenes, introduce the game and do that. And a little bit of organization goes a long way, and you can see it is just a regular file explorer connected to your computer. It creates the folder over here as well. Anytime we do that. You probably need some more folders in there. You can right click also over here in the file explorer thing. Right click and create another new folder for our graphics. Just the imported graphics, and then we'll turn those into objects we can use in the game. Or long click if you're on a Mac, or alt click. I guess that also works. Hold alt. I know whenever I'm on my Mac, I've gotten the habit of just holding the button down for a long time with the right click. Or use a 2-button mouse. That works too. There's always multiple ways to do things. Oh, I thought he was already here. And now to get those images we drew here, we can just drag them over. So I'll go over here to the delete folder. Did I not save the last one? Oh, I did not. Let me save Death Star. Okay. 2 people in the waiting room. Who's in the waiting room? Oh, he must have a bad connection. Oh, there it is. Is it working this time, Charles? It's being recorded, so if you have having connection troubles, you can check the recording. It should be ready about 10 or 15 minutes after we finish class. It doesn't take too long to process it. Okay, so we have a folder to organize these graphics into. I just put them in my little Scratch folder. I always have a folder called delete, and that's where I save everything. And if it doesn't get moved out of that folder within a week's time, it means it's probably a file that's not worth saving. So I'll grab, oh, not all. That one, that one, that one, and that one, and just drag them over to that graphics folder. It flashed really quick there, but there was a little import thing, and it didn't take hardly any time to import those, so it went super quick. But now we have those graphics in the project. Drag and drop in the file explorer, right? It's exactly the same as if we had 2 of these and drag and drop between it. Drag and drop between them. Y'all know those processes. Hopefully, no surprises there. It's just built into the game engine, and most of our game engines have a file explorer in there because we're going to have lots of files to make the game. So we could, the other day when we were introducing it, we just drag everything over there to that level and sort of build it all right there. But a better form is to separate them into different scenes. So a little plus sign here by the tab, we can create a new scene over here. And the root of it, I guess we can start with make this the X-Wing scene. So we'll start with, it's going to move, and so it's not static. So we want some sort of body. We search for body. There's a couple things here. I found a great tutorial last night. I'm going to send you all. It's only an hour. It's only an hour long. It's a bit small for our thing, but it's a full game that relies entirely on physics. It's a great introduction to physics. I'm going to start using it in the 248 class. If anybody's taking that in the spring, where it's where physics is one of the major objectives. I came across that last night, and he explained bodies really good. So static body, that's the stationary ones. They do not move. Physics applies, but they don't move. So like the ground's solid. So when something kinematic hits the ground, it's going to bounce off of it. Rigid body is kind of the other of the main 2 we have. Usually it's static bodies and rigid bodies. Rigid bodies means the laws of physics apply. They get a little bit trickier to work with sometimes, because if we think about our player, you know, the typical go-to is probably going to be something human-shaped. Maybe we're making Donkey Kong or Mario Brothers knockoff, so we have monkeys and turtles, but we have that some sort of living creature shape, right? That's not going to be a perfect symmetric box. So whenever the laws of physics happen, the computer is going to determine where the center of gravity is. So when you like come down and hit your jump and then come down on a platform, there's a good chance the character is going to start spinning and go off balance, just because of the application of forces, right? And everybody in here at least once in your life has jumped up and come down, right? We have to adjust for that coming down part, but the computer will just run the laws of physics without the player have to code that adjustment, just like when we jump and come down and rebalance ourselves.
What character body is?
character body is a Godot one that is set up specifically for the characters, and it has a little bit of that worked into. They backed off some of it. So one of the things is character body by default freezes the rotation. So that if we jump up and come down on our platform, we don't like fall down or fall to the side or start spinning. They freeze the rotation and a couple other little things like that. They went ahead and took a couple steps that when they knew were going to happen there every time. Character body are generally things that move. Rigid body is just the full laws of physics applied, but like I was just saying, when we jump and come down, we have to adjust for it a little bit. And same thing in our code. If all the laws of physics are applied, we have to adjust for that in our code. So spaceship's probably a character body. Whoops, not a character body 3D. I did not mean to click that. I'm just gonna hit delete. And other node, I'm searching for character body again, or just body. It's one of the physics ones, but I want the 2D character body. 3D Space Invaders. Actually, the Star Wars theme would probably be good for 3D Space Invaders, because then we could do aiming up and down and spinning left and right, and that's just turning the camera. But not quite what's in mind for today. So that's just our logical body. That's the thing we code. We need to attach the graphics to it. I just dropped this here. I was not going to drop this job. So with the graphics, a lot of times we have to bring them in here. Not that one. It's going to be the X-Men. So we'll bring that in. And like we saw the other day, it's better to work with meshes. So when that's selected, this right when we could work with the image the whole time, it will work perfectly fine. But as your games get larger, the pure images are less efficient. So the more interesting your game becomes, there's a big loss in efficiency if you stick even with the images. So it's good form to go ahead and convert it to a mesh. Because then it's a set of numbers. We can kind of see it here. It's a bunch of vertices in space. The whole connect the dot thing, bunch of vertices in space, 2D space in this case, with those lines connecting them. And they're vectors. So if you remember back to day one, it's not that point sitting on our graph. It's the arrow that goes from the origin to that point, and we can move an arrow anywhere we want. Points are kind of locked in space. So that's what those lines are really. It's all the arrows without the arrowheads connecting the dots. And we can move them around. So the default's probably good. Resize it, do all that stuff. Okay, awesome. In the chat room, sorry, I didn't see that come up for a minute. There is somebody knows the website that has some good sound effects that would be accurate for Star Wars games. The Star Wars lasers, because we got the original Star Wars lasers were an open source sound. We saw the other day though, we want to watch the alignment. So our logical body, there's no structure to it, but we can see what's highlighted there. It's at 0, 0, 0. And our X-Wing is way over here. So I'm going to grab the transform and switch that to 0, 0. Make sure it's set in the right spot. Here's the check mark. A lot of times we might not want the center, so we can move that off, right? Like we wanted the corner, choose the character body and the move tool, and then bring it down so that it's like the upper right corner's the one we're looking at. Or maybe we want the bottom rear of the spaceship to be our coordinate. So we can move that to wherever we want. I'm just gonna leave it at 0, 0 because that'll be fine as long as we're consistent and we know which part it is. Yes.
So after you've done the thing of converting it to a mesh like this, if you then go back and update the original PNG, will that upgrade this or update this thing, or do you have to do something separate?
In this case, it would not update this one. So you would just replace the image. So you would update that and then come back in, it's gonna have the same name, right?
Yeah.
So then at that point, all of the settings are still there. So notice right here, the texture over in the inspector,
Oh, you just changed that to be.
we
whatever
just
you're-
changed that to a new copy of that thing. The updated version of that thing. I just dragged that to a different folder, didn't I? Oh, no, it's-
I think you dragged it out.
Yes. Yes. Try not to mess up your organization with it, but yes, right here's the image that's loaded into that mesh. So we can just change that, which I think instead of dragging and dropping, it might be a better idea to do the drop down menu and then do a load. Good question. When we're doing 3D, Blender is fully integrated. So if we're using a model that we created in Blender, when we update the model in Blender, it will update in Godot automatically. Because they're fully integrated. We could integrate our editor. So let's point at this button because we're still sort of introducing this. Under file system and external programs, things are raster images. So if we went ahead and assigned this editor here, we could edit it so that it would update automatically. Over the years, I've also found that's a good step to introduce mistakes at too. You might update before you mean to, and or do something that's hard to undo. But yeah, good question. So there's that. What's still missing? Somebody want to tell me? So the logic for it, that's what this is. I'm gonna go ahead and give it that name. So I'm gonna call it X-Wing. I'm gonna rename this as X-Wing underscore graphics and keep the parts separate, right? Kind of goes with that organization thing, give it good names to organize it. So we have the logic and the image. Somebody want to say what's missing still? Another background. So we have that little warning there. Do you have that yellow triangle warning? It'll say what it is.
Has no
Yeah.
shape.
Has no shape.
Yeah. So yeah, we can't apply the laws of physics to logic or images. Laws of physics apply to physical shapes. So we'll select that and hit the plus sign. Or with Godot, I really like to right click on the thing in the hierarchy because it's so easy to select the wrong thing and then accidentally make the new node the child of the wrong one. But if you right click on it, you can be a lot more certain about what you right clicked on. Add a new node and search for collision, or we could abbreviate it and search for shape. It is a fuzzy finder. It's not an exact match. So the fuzzy finder, it'll give you anything that's close to shape. And we'll give it a collision shape 2D. And then we just have to decide what that collision shape is going to be. So that's selected. Over here, notice the shape field is empty. Rectangle is probably good. And then we can zoom in and kind of stretch it out. For this game, anything close is probably good. Every game's going to be a little bit different, right? Sometimes we might want a rectangle that surrounds the whole thing. Other times we might want to do a polygon. We haven't seen polygon. We saw rectangles the other day. I'm going to undo that instead of empty. Let's do a convex polygon. Because this one we draw our shape. Almost never use these. It's not a single shape, circle. Going concave. Uh, oh, that's not doing what I anticipated it to. I almost never use those, but the polygon shapes are the ones we draw. Let me try that one more time. If it doesn't work this time,
Is there any segment
Okay.
shape? Is that
segments are often one-sided things, so just like a little dot shape.
okay? I didn't know if it was like you draw segments or something.
That would work, but they would be disconnected.
Yeah.
So a polygon is lots of shapes, but I almost never use them because they obviously that's going to take a lot more processing than a simple rectangle.
Depends on sort of game
Yes, everyone's going to be different. And this one, I was thinking it'd be a good place to look at it because like anything, and I can't remember what the edit function is for it. Polygon-based shapes not meant to be used. Oh, so instead of collision shape, should be using collision polygon. That's why. Helps to read the warning label. So if we search for collision, you'll see there's an option for collision polygon, which is what the warning message said to do. And then this should be able to edit it. An empty collision polygon is to be created. So we'll come over here. And I guess start editing. Okay, yeah. Whoops. Do that. So just grab one of the corners and you can kind of start drawing out from there. So maybe first off, move it up here. So we have this little corner here. And then I'll grab this corner, bring it down here. Release and then click again to draw another line. Here, down for the little wing. And if you want a more exact collision shape, something like that. But you can see there's a lot of points there that it's got a lot of points it has to process. Something like that. This one back down and then back down and make sure that you get back to that beginning to fully close the shape. So there's our collision shape. So fairly accurate, but a little bit unnecessary if we're just shooting at the spaceship, right? You'll always want to weigh that, but a lot of times that precise shape might be exactly what you want, especially for a strange room or a platformer game where you might have like curved bridges and all sorts of different shapes to jump onto instead of just square platforms. But obviously it takes a little more process. That takes underscore shape. When we save it, it's not a level, so I'm going to go up and create a new folder. So we have the raw graphics themselves. I want to create a new folder for the game objects. New folder called objects. That's a good name for it. Matches what we were doing last week. And notice the file extension it gave is TCSN. So nodes go together and make a scene, which is what we would normally call objects and other game engines. What we called objects when we were in Game Maker last week. Oops. My pocket for that. Okay, yeah, so we have this object that we can use in our game now. So I'll leave that open, come back over here. And these are the ones that just drag and drop nicely. So if I come down here to the file manager, I can just click it and drag it up to make that a child of our scene. Looks like it's a little big, doesn't it?
What did you call the subfolder you put the thing?
Objects. Trying to kind of matching what we did last week. I guess the graphics probably could have been both sprites. So you see that purple line? That's indicating what our scene. That's our viewing window. So it looks like that's going to be a little bit big for the scene. So I'll come over here and just grab the parent object, and under transform, right, location, rotation, and scale, we can just scale that down. Let's say 0.5. And it was locked in place, so it automatically went down 0.5 in both directions. It might still be a little bit big by the time we get a bunch of them on there. Too easy of a target, right? So maybe scale it to 0.25. And it looks like the link icon, usually where we would normally have the padlock icon, that locks the aspect ratio. So if we scale it down in one direction, if we scale it down to 1, it's going to go down in the other. So we don't get any strange skewing. Then when we save it, we'll be able to see it on their side. So that looks like it saved okay. We can put 16 of them up there somewhere. You probably give this a test run. Let me move that somewhere towards the middle of the screen where we see it. And hopefully we're going to get a cutscene in by the end of the day. Cutscenes in Star Wars themes are easy. So if we run that, you see that. Moving back and forth. We'll probably make it a little bit taller. Yeah, I'll just make it a little bit taller. So I want to show where the buttons were. I was thinking about making it narrower as well, but.
So you were scaling it down in the X-Wing.
Yes, so I went to the X-Wing tab.
Yeah.
Select the parent object because the children automatically do what the parent does.
Yeah.
So with the parent selected under transform, I scaled it down here. And you do have to hit save here before you'll see the changes in the other one. The run button automatically saves everything. So the run button is actually a save and run. But anything, if you're making changes to like for the viewport, you have to change it first to see it. And one of the things I wanted to look at was how to make that a little bit bigger. So under project, I remember the other day, I'm pretty sure I mentioned it, we'll be in project settings on every single project we make because it's pretty rare that we want the general, it's unlikely that we would want the generic default configurations on every single game we make. So there's almost always something to change. Here on the general tab, under display is window, and right up here is our size. So 1152 by 648. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger, so like 700. Just really all I wanted to show was where that button was. So if you want to change your screen size, that's where you go to change it. I don't know if we can see much difference there. Yeah, that wasn't much difference. It's 50 pixels taller. That's where the button is to change it. That was all I really wanted to show about that part. Oh, wait. Yeah, there is a difference because you can't get to the close button now. I can only barely get to the close button. That'll work. If I move it down and restart it, does it start in the change position? Oh, my close button is still almost out of reach. But that'll be fine for today's example.
Where did you set that was for the screen size?
Screen size under project settings on the global tab, and the display section is the window. And there's a whole bunch of stuff about the window. You can also change
General, you mean not?
Yes, general tab, and then under display is window.
Yeah.
And then the width and the height. Oh, here's that one that's giving me problems. Center of other screen, center screen with mouse pointer. center screen. You choose where it was. I don't think any of those would really help because I made it too small for my screen. Oh, Charles is back. Maybe his internet's working now. That's always frustrating when you're trying to log into a Zoom call. Events beyond, and it's always events beyond our control. If that ever happens to anybody, hopefully you can hear this time. And that's why I always record classes, because yeah, it's frustrating when you're trying to be on a Zoom call and the thing keeps cutting off. You can see what other settings are there. Everything's clearly labeled. Like portrait mode, I think portrait mode would probably fit better for the old arcade style games. We'll replicate an old arcade game, but lots and lots of settings. So it looks like that ship will work, but we need that ship to do something, right? And like we saw last time. So we come back over to the X-Wing thing and add a script on here so it starts doing something. And we saw the logic last time. Oh, okay. So we went with a character body, so it's trying to use that basic movement script. That'll work for us. X-Wing's a good name, but it's put in the objects folder. I would think a script folder is a much better place to store scripts. So I'm going to go up to the parent directory and create a new folder called scripts. X-Wing's a good name for it. That's great. I can get rid of these basic movements. So, we don't need physics. Well, we don't need gravity, right? It's a spaceship. We don't need gravity applying on the spaceship. We're not going to jump, and we'll have a speed eventually, but I'm just going to get rid of that. Actually, we probably can get rid of a lot of this stuff. So we're not jumping, so we don't need to worry about that jumping stuff. Delete that. Here's the direction input, but that the computer's controlling that, so we don't need any of that. Basically, we worked everything out. We could have just started with a blank script in this case. And just started with a blank script instead of that template and just type that one word because that's all we really got. So there are 3 functions. So I'll try to zoom in a little bit. There's not a ton of space here. So func, the abbreviation for function, is our keyword that we want to create a function. Then we'll give it a name, or there are a couple that are built in. One of those is ready. And this is runs one time at initialization. So as soon as this object shows up in the game for the very first time, whether it's when the game starts or later, like when we fire our laser, initialization is going to happen when we hit that fire button. This will run one time, and then it's kind of based off Python, so we don't have anything to put in that indented section, but it will require us to. So the word pass just fills that in. And then we have the 2 functions to work. 2 functions for each frame in Godot. So underscore process, and it will take in a parameter called delta. This runs each frame of the game. With graphics priority. Keyword pass again. So if you want your graphics to have priority, you'll put all of your logic into this function called process. And physics is physics underscore process. Same thing, only it gives physics priority. And in general, a game has to get pretty big before that's going to show up. I'll just put all our stuff in physics process. It's a small game. That's the one that seems to be used more often until you get to like where you're trying to do realism. Because
Is
if
the graphics or
the physics priority, if you're until you're trying to do complete realism in your graphics, you probably want the things interacting correctly over the little like slight delays, right? Like your character can go through the wall, go halfway through a wall, and then bounce back out a split second later. We're talking milliseconds and nanoseconds in that priority. It's not like a big delay, and the game has to get massive before humans would notice it. So nanoseconds and milliseconds priority. But if you're doing complete photorealism, you probably want to give the graphics. You want to make sure the graphics have priority so that your character does not pass halfway through a wall, because that is a long way from realism. And then your physics interactions can be delayed by a few milliseconds. So you choose which one's more important for the particular game, initialize things, and then the stuff for each frame of the game. We've seen that over and over and over again, right? When we saw Pygame, that's how we set everything up. In Game Maker, there's similar thing. It went right to left in that GUI. Right over on the left of our form was all of the initialization stuff. And then when we moved right, we got to what happened at each frame of the game or at each event. So how are our shifts going to move? They're going to start by moving right, move right for a while, then left, then they'll go down. What I found over the years, there's some timer events we could use. I found it can be a little more productive to just count frames, but we should probably see how timers work in this case, right? So, no, I didn't pull up a timer in the example I have already, but I've done it a few times. So, let's create a new variable called turnaround. Sounds like a good variable for our Space Invaders ships, right? It's going to be of type timer, and we'll assign it timer.new is the syntax we use. That's just instantiating a new object is something we do in all of our programming languages. So here is the syntax for language we're working in here. It's a lot like, you can see it's very different than Python, but there's it's based off Python. So there's a lot of similarities, but this is a syntax that goes through a C++ compiler. So a very, very optimized C++ compiler for speed, optimized for speed. So when it compiles, it's trying to get the fastest machine language code it can get. And the timers we can set up here. Maybe I should pull up an example of a timer. Do I have one in any of the examples in front of me? Make sure I don't skip any steps. Nope, this one doesn't have it either. So hopefully I won't skip any steps. So first thing we have to do is we need to get rid of the code that doesn't do anything, because that's just kind of clutter here. First thing we want to do is connect our timer. So we have that turnaround timer, and we can connect it to something. So .connect, and then we'll connect to a timeout. There's different options. That's when that's just countdown. We'll say here in the next line or two, we'll tell it how long to wait, and then we'll say turn around. And whenever it turns around, we need a function that we can call. We pass in a callback. So I'll make a function called reverse. And at this point, you pass it in. If you haven't seen callbacks yet, A function is just, it's a variable storing instructions instead of data, right? So we need it in the variable form, just a place that's storing instructions. We don't actually want it to run yet. So the function name without parentheses, and then I'll come down here somewhere and create that function. Reverse and fill it out in a second. So whenever this timer runs out, it's going to call that function. Then we need to, how long do we wait? So turn around, wait underscore time. Most of Godot is set up with snake case, but we have predictive text and all that. Anybody remember our logic from last week when we made this in a different game engine? How long did we wait to turn our ships around? It was pretty quick, wasn't it? I can't remember what we used, so I'm just going to throw a number in there. Let's say 1.5. Let's see if 1.5 seconds works for turning our ships around. Is this going to happen one time or over and over and over again? Turn around dot one shot. If it happens one time, then we will one shot would be true. But if it's going to happen over and over again, we'll do that. We want that false. In this case, right, so replica of Space Invaders, so ships are going to go back and forth every couple seconds, so they're going to keep turning around. So we'll set one shot to false. And then that method's going to be really, really easy. We'll get to the logic of that before the break, actually. Still, then we add it to our scene, and this is an important one. We'll see over and over again. So add child. Like we didn't put any objects before that; it just implied. This kind of calls the parent game engine object, and this adds to the scene we're in. So if we'll see it again when we add, make our turret fire lasers at the ships. We'll need to add a new laser every time we hit that fire button, but we don't want them there at the start of the game, so we can't have them in the initial spot of the scene. So add child will just add things to the scene we're in. In this case, it is the X-wing scene. The X-wing scene that then becomes a node in the levels. What we're going to add the child to is that's what we add it to, and we want to add that timer we just created because we didn't put any timer objects over here in our drag and drop stuff. So we need to make sure that one we just created is there. And then we can start it whenever we want to. So start. If you didn't guess the word to start it already. And for choosing our direction, what I'm gonna do is just create a variable. I found I like to call it left, and that'll be Boolean sort of data. Bool, sorry, it's abbreviated. So instead of a Boolean sort of data, but we abbreviate it down to just bool. I think bool. We'll see if it stays again after I type that up here. And that's going to say what direction we are. So we'll check if left, then left. If that's false, then we'll move to the right. And that's why I usually go with left instead of the word right, because the word right has homonyms in English. Too many things that sound the same as right. Left doesn't have any extra meanings. Either way. Maybe I do need to spell it. Nope. Yeah, fine type bullet. Okay. I thought, yeah, I thought it showed an error, but yeah, that's why it was in particular text. So then that's what our reverse is going to do. We'll say, whenever we call this method, we'll say the left equals not left. So it just becomes whatever it was. So if it was false, it becomes true. If it was true, it becomes false. That's the easiest way to keep track of that. And since this is based off Python, I'm going to add a little comment down here about ending the method, because since it's just indentation, it's really easy to get lost in white space sometimes. Like in underscore. Just a comment so I can tell where the end of the method is. The downside of Python is it can be a real challenge to track down the missing or extra white space. It's way harder than tracking down a missing semicolon or extra curly brace. Those are obvious. Well, let's see. And then we'll end our ready function. So this should make our, this timer goes down, our ship will start. Left is false, so we'll start moving to the right. After 1.5 seconds, that was just a guess on time. That's probably way too long. This timer will time out, call this reverse method, move to the left, and then keep going back and forth. So we'll just check that. Because we need a speed to move at, right? The variable speed is floating point data. And, oh, I don't know. Let's see what 5 does. It might be almost stopped. It might be moving. There's a lot of variables in it. And if we can adjust it, let's add in that export keyword so that it shows up. After I hit save, so that it shows up over in the inspector panel. And that way we can change it when the game's running to try to figure out what a good number is for that speed. Then we can just do a selection structure here in our main frame. Okay. So if left, then we need to change our transform data, the position, so many pixels to the left, speed to the left. So we saw that before. We automatically have access to our transform data, so we can just ask for the position. Or if you can't remember that, right, over here in the inspector, we have the transform data. So if we hold control and click and drag that over, that'll give us what it is. Whoops. I have to do that the other way. I'll try that again. Click, then hit control and drag it over. If you hold control first, you get quote marks. I don't know why it's giving me quote marks. I want it without quote marks. Maybe. Oh, I remember what we were doing the other day. Right click, copy property, control shift C. So if we just highlight it, control shift V, then control shift V, control V to paste it in. If you can't remember what it's called. Position, you would probably remember what it's called, but I wanted to remind you we could drag stuff from our GUI in there. And that is the functionality that leads to Godot getting ranked with Unity and Unreal. Godot is in no way a competitor for Unreal, but Godot, Unity, and Unreal are the 3 that have that functionality. The words are already on our graphical interfaces for the editor somewhere, and we can drag and drop them into our code. So position.x is going to be whatever it was. Do we want to add our speed or subtract? If left.
If left is true, which means you're traveling left, yeah.
Minus speed, and yes, it's in the chat room as well. We'll look at that here in just a second. So somebody's getting an error. We'll check somewhere on this line. It's almost break time, but as soon as we do this else, we'll be able to do a quick test, and then we'll take a break. And if we're not moving left, then we're going to be moving right, correct? So it should be a fairly straightforward if else. It's actually a nice little way to do it in one time, but we don't need fancy logic tricks. Just logic. Same thing we were doing the other day, but just in a different game engine. That we can learn how to do it with this tool using some logic that we've already talked about. Right, so it goes right, left, right, left. Oh, looks like 1.5 is way too slow, but that might be a good speed. The window's a little bit big, so maybe I'll turn that window back to the size. I just want to show you all what that was with that. What was it originally? 648? Somewhere around there. Think about do that. It's still too high, so I probably need to move it back down onto the screen somewhere. It looks like it's moving left and right, so when we add a whole bunch of them, go to the 2D view. Why isn't it starting way down here? Okay. I hadn't done anything since then, so somewhere the preview was getting off. Copy and paste works. There's a duplicate key, but we go edit. There's a duplicate shortcut, but copy and paste works like normal. So if we do Control C and Control V, we can and then set up our new spaceship. Oh, but notice what happened when I did that Control C and Control V. It made each one a child of the earlier one. So I'm going to delete those two. So you do want to watch out for this. Grab this, Control C for copy, and then make sure you go back to the root node to paste it in. So another one there, a little, back to the root node, paste it in. Zoom in so you can see it. How many did we do the other day? We did 12, right? Replicate, do at least something very similar to what we were doing the other day, that whole the logic. And I can select all 4 of those, hit copy, node, paste that in. Paste. So now we should have that fleet of ships moving left and right. Probably do a little more than a second and a half. Like 1.75. And notice if I highlight all of them and the move tool is selected, I can't move all of them as a group without actually making an array. Probably make an array here. But, we're just quickly looking at the tool. Let's see what 1.75 does. And not quite the full screen, so a little bit more. Probably go to. And just refine on those numbers. The speed looks okay there, right? I think we'll be able to shoot at those ships. We can go bigger than 2.25. Run that. Okay, that seems to fill out our whole screen nicely. I mean, I was hoping to take a break about 5 minutes ago, but must have got a little distracted somewhere along there. This is the point I was planning on being when we get for a break. Does That makes sense. We've seen that same game before, right? Just in a different game engine. And that's something you want to keep in mind. Find a game that you can make over and over and again to learn different game engines, and then also use that to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of a new engine so that you're better equipped to choose the best one for the game you want to make. Right now it's probably break time, right? We'll finish this up after a break. 10 minutes sound good? Because we just saw a bunch of our tools, right? You'll remember last week, the rest of the logic is replicating those things for the other parts of the game. But let's take a break first, and we'll get back to it at 2:31.